That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the dark living room with H.A. Rold's old revolver in my lap, not because I planned to use it, but because I needed to remember what steel felt like. Derek had been upstairs for hours, pacing and cursing. I heard him slam drawers, throw a shoe against the wall, scream into his phone at some poor customer service representative who had no idea they were talking to a man whose entire financial empire had just evaporated in a single night. I smiled in the dark at 3 a.m. He came downstairs. He didn't turn on any lights. He walked straight to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept my checkbook, and pulled it out. He didn't know I had moved it 2 hours earlier. He stood there, breathing heavy, realizing it was empty. Then he walked to the hall closet, where I kept the safe. He knew the combination. He had watched me open it a dozen times. But I had changed it. He tried 3 times. 3 wrong beeps. He slammed his fist against the wall, and I felt the vibration through the floorboard RDS beneath my feet. He went back upstairs, defeated. I heard Emily's sleepy voice ask what was wrong. He snapped at her, called her useless. I heard her cry. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Not yet. Not yet. Up by sunrise, I had made my first real move. I called the credit union and asked CARL to issue 2 certified checks, one for the exact amount of the mortgage on Derek's mother's house in Cincinnati, and one for the remaining balance on his leased BMW. I asked him to mail them to the respective lenders overnight. By noon, Derek would wake up to find that his mother's house was no longer his family's asset. It was gone, sold to a third-party through a power of sale I had arranged. And his car, repossessed because the lease payment I had always made for him, as a gift, was now 3 months overdue. He never knew I was paying it. He never knew I was the reason he had any credit at all. That I picked up my phone and dialed Emily's number. She answered with a tired whisper. Mom, it's EARLY. I know, sweet I said, my voice calm and even. I need you to come home for lunch today. Just you. Please. Why, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said, lying through my teeth. I just miss you. I made your favorite chicken salad. Please, Emily. For me. She hesitated, then agreed. I hung up and Prepper read my battlefield. By the time she walked through the door, at 12:30, I had the evidence laid out on the dining room table. Bank statements. The power of attorney forms. The nursing home brochure. A transcript of what I had heard in the GA rage. Written in my own hand, Emily walked in, pale and thin, her eyes shadowed. Mom, what is all this? I took her hands and sat her down. Your husband is trying to steal everything your father and I built. He plans to put me in a home, commit me as incompetent, and sell this house out from under us. I heard him say it. She read at me. Her face went through 5 stages in 3 seconds. Disbelief, confusion, denial, anger. And then, finally, a horrible, gut-wrenching recognition. No, she whispered. No, he wouldn't. He loves me. He loves your money, Emily. He loves this house. He loves the idea of a life he didn't earn. I have proof. Every single document is here. Read it. And then tell me I'm wrong. She read. Her hands shook. By the time she got to the nursing home brochure with Dr. Leona Road Price's name circled in red, she was crying. I didn't know, she sobbed. I didn't know he was like this. I swear to God, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said, pulling her close. That's why we're going to fix it. Together. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Emily gave me information I didn't have. Derek's mistress, a woman at his office, named Stephanie. The secret credit cards. The offshore account he bragged about at dinner parties. She even knew the password to his encrypted laptop, a detail he had drunkenly revealed one night when he thought she was asleep. She had never used it, but now she handed it over like a weapon. At 3 p.m., I called Janet the lawyer and gave her the update. She was impressed. You're moving fast, Margaret. This is good. But you need to be careful. He's going to retaliate. I'm counting on it, I said. I've already set the trap. By evening, the first domino fell. Derek came home furious, his face purple with rage. His mother had called him, screaming about the mortgage letter. The dealership had left a voicemail about the CAR. And his bank's compliance department had launched an internal investigation into his trading activity. Somebody tipped them off. He growled at me over dinner. Somebody in this family is sabotaging me. I looked at him with wide eyes. Derek, I'm an old woman. I don't know anything about trading or mortgages. What could I possibly do? Emily sat silent, her fork in midair, watching the predator circle her mother. She said nothing. She was Leah running. Something is happening, he said, pacing the kitchen. Money is moving. Accounts being frozen. This isn't random. This is a coordinated attack. Maybe it's the bank, Emily said ruefully, her voice soft. You said yourself they were auditing you. He spun on her. Shut up. You don't know anything about business. You're just like your mother. Useless, weak, pathetic. He slammed his fist on the counter, and the dishes rattled. I stood up. Derek, calm down. Your SCA ring her. He laughed, a ugly, bitter sound. SCA ring her, I'm just getting STA root. If I find out who's doing this, I'll destroy them. You understand me, I'll bury them so deep they'll never see daylight again. I looked him dead in the eye. I understand perfectly. He didn't sleep that night. I watched from my bedroom window as he paced the RD, phone pressed to his EAR, making frantic calls. He was trying to fix the leaks. But every call led to another dead end. Every bank refused to release funds. Every credit CARD company flagged his accounts. His mother's house was gone. His CAR was gone. And at sunrise, when he went to log into his trading platform, he found it locked. A message on the screen. This account has been frozen pending investigation. He screamed. I heard it from the kitchen. A raw, primal scream of a man realizing he had lost everything. I poured myself a cup of tea, added 2 Suga RS, and watched the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. He stormed into the kitchen, wild-eyed. You did this, he SNA relayed, pointing a shaking finger at me. I know you did this. I don't know how, but you did. I STA read at him calmly. Derek, you're not well. You're imagining things. Maybe you should see a doctor. Don't you re-gaslight me, you old witch. I'm not gaslighting you, I said, picking up my teacup. I'm simply stating facts. You're the one who's been making reckless financial decisions. You're the one who was investigated. You're the one who lost your money. That's not my doing. That's just consequences. He lunged for me. Emily Ape read from the hallway, her face frozen in terror. But I didn't flinch. I held up a small digital recorder and pressed play. His voice filled the kitchen, unmistakable. I told you it's done. The old lady's account's practically liquid. Next up is the nursing home. She won't have a penny to fight back with. Derek froze. His face drained of all color. Where did you get that from? My GA rage, I said, the night you were planning my funeral. And I have copies. Lots of copies. They've already been sent to your bank's compliance team, the SEC, and the local police. I suggest you START looking for a good attorney, because you're going to need one. Emily stepped 4-way road. Her voice was quiet, but steady. Derek, I want a divorce. And I want you out of this house by the end of the week. He STA read at her, his mouth opening and closing like a dying fish. Emily, baby, you can't do this. I love you. I love you. You love my mother's money, she said coldly. You love my father's legacy. But you have never loved me. Goodbye, Derek. He tried to grab her arm, but I stepped between them, the recorder still in my hand. I wouldn't, I said. In case you haven't noticed, you're not in control anymore. He backed away, his eyes rooting from me to Emily to the recorder. Then he turned and ran. He ran out the front door, still in his bathrobe, and drove off in the CAR he didn't know had already been repossessed. I waited for the tow truck to show up on the street corner. It did. And I watched them haul away his BMW, his last shred of dignity. While he stood at the end of the driveway screaming obscenities into his phone, Emily collapsed into my ARMS, sobbing. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I held her tight. I know, but you see it now. And that's what matters. We're going to be okay. Not because we won. Because we were strong enough to fight back. By midnight, Derek was officially homeless. His accounts empty. His CA are gone. His mistress had stopped answering his calls. His mother's house was in foreclosure. The police had opened a file on financial elder abuse. And I sat in my living room, holding H.A. Rold's clock in my hands, and I said to his memory, I kept my promise. I took CA of her. The first battle was over. But the war wasn't finished. I had bigger plans. Because Derek's boss, his partners, the developers he'd been talking to, they were all in his network. And they had all been complicit in his schemes. It was time to clean house, and I poured myself another cup of tea, pulled out my laptop, and STA root typing. It was time to go after the rest of them. The story was far from over. But for the first time in years, I held the pen. And I was writing a very different ending than Derek expected. The morning after Derek fled, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I went to the GA Rage and pulled down H.A. Rold's old stepladder. The paint was chipped, the wood worn smooth from decades of use. I CA righted to the attic and climbed up into the heat and dust. There, in a CA Boe Road box marked, Taxes 1998, I found what I was looking for. H.A. Rold's little black book. His network. Every supplier, every contractor, every banker, every lawyer who had ever done business with H.A. Rold's HARDWA. And at the very back, a section labeled Trouble. Names of people who had tried to cheat us, who had shorted shipments, who had lied about invoices. People who had reneged the HARD way that H.A. Rold Kennedy was not a man to cross. Derek had made a critical mistake. He had told me about his developer contact by name during that call. A man named Vincent California Russo. I remembered that name from H.A. Rold's book. C.A. Russo was in the trouble section. He had tried to lowball H.A. Rold on a property deal 30 years ago. H.A. Rold had walked away and told everyone in the industry about it. C.A. Russo had been forced to relocate his business. And now he was back, circling my house like a vulture. I called Janet first. I need you to find everything you can on Vincent California Russo. His current holdings, his partners, his outstanding permits, any lawsuits. Janet whistled. C.A. Russo, that's big. He's got connections all over the city. What are you planning? I'm planning to show him that the same woman he tried to swindle 30 years ago still remembers his name. And this time, I'm not walking away. I spent the next 3 days doing RC. Emily helped me. She was a librarian after all. She knew how to find information better than anyone. We combed through public records, property deeds, corporate filings. We found that C.A. Russo had been involved in a dozen redevelopment projects across Columbus, most of them in older neighborhoods where the residents couldn't afford good lawyers. He had a pattern. Buy low, pressure the elderly out, bulldoze the property, build luxury condos. And Derek had been his inside man, feeding him information about vulnerable seniors with valuable homes. I was just one of many. I felt sick to my stomach, not because of what they had done to me, but because of what they had done to others. There was an elderly woman on Maple Street whose house C.A. Russo had bought for a fraction of its value. There was a disabled veteran on Oak who had been forced into a home because he couldn't afford the property taxes after C.A. Russo's development inflated them. I found names. I found addresses. I found heartbreaking stories, but I also found leverage. C.A. Russo's permits were shaky. He had violated zoning laws on at least 3 projects. He had falsified documents. He had bribed a city inspector. I found the paper trail, buried in a lawsuit that had been settled out of court. The man who had sued him had been paid off, but the evidence still existed. I had copies. Now I had to decide how to use it. I went to the library where Emily worked and sat in the quiet reading room, making notes. I knew I couldn't take on C.A. Russo directly. He was too powerful, too connected. But I could create enough noise that his investors would RT to question him. I could make him radioactive. And once he was radioactive, Derek would be tainted by association. That was the plan. Destroy C.A. Russo's reputation, and Derek would fall with him, I made my first call to a journalist named Rachel Walsh. She was an investigative reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, known for her work on corruption and elder abuse. I had read her articles for YRS. I had even met her once at a community meeting about property taxes. She was fierce, relentless, and she didn't take bribes. I told her everything. Not just about Derek and C.A. Russo, but about the pattern. The vulnerable victims. The falsified permits. The bribes. I gave her copies of every document I had found. She listened in silence, taking notes. When I finished, she looked up with fire in her eyes. "Mrs. Kennedy, this is a story that needs to be told. I'll need to verify some of this information, but if it's true, this is going to bring down a lot of people." "I hope so," I said. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." 2 days later, the first article app read. Front page. Developer Vincent California Russo accused of predatory practices, targeting elderly homeowners. The article was meticulously researched, full of names and dates and documents. It listed the victims, including a brief mention of a Cincinnati-based financial advisor who had been working as C.A. Russo's inside source. They didn't name Derek directly, but they left enough breadcrumbs for anyone paying attention to follow. Derek's phone STA route ringing off the hook. I knew because I had access to his email account. Emily had given me the password, and I had been monitoring it. The emails were desperate. One from his lawyer, telling him to lay low. One from his bank, informing him that his employment was terminated, effective immediately. One from C.A. Russo, furious and blaming Derek for the leak. I smiled as I read them. The dominoes were falling faster than I had anticipated, but C.A. Russo wasn't going down without a fight. The next day, a man in a black suit showed up at my door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He handed me a business card that read America's Web, Private Investigations. "Mrs. Kennedy," he said, his voice flat, "I've been hired by Mr. C.A. Russo to deliver a message. He's willing to offer you a settlement, a substantial one, in exchange for your silence and your cooperation in retracting your statements to the press." I took the card and looked at it. "No," I said. He blinked. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. Mr. C.A. Russo is a generous man. He's prepared to offer you a very comfortable retirement. All you have to do is stop talking to reporters." "I'm already retired," I said. "And I'm very comfortable. Tell Mr. C.A. Russo that if he wants to talk to me, he can do it through my attorney. Here's her C.A. Road." I handed him Janet's C.A. Road. "Goodbye, Mr. Webb." He stood there for a moment, uncertain. Then he nodded, turned, and walked back to his black sedan. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I had just told a powerful man to go to hell. There was no going back now. That evening, Emily came home with news. "Mom, I found something. On one of C.A. Russo's projects, there's a whistleblower, a former employee who saw everything. He was fired for reporting the violations. He's been trying to get someone to listen for 2 years. I found him on a forum for construction workers." "Can you reach him?" I asked. "I already did. His name is Frank. He's agreed to meet us tomorrow at a diner on the south side." The next morning, Emily and I drove to the diner. Frank was waiting for us, a grizzled man in his 50s with hands that told stories of hard work. He ordered coffee and spilled everything. He told us about the inspections that were bought, the corners that were cut, the buildings that were unsafe. He told us about the elderly residents who had been bullied into selling, their homes bulldozed to make way for luxury apartments they could never afford. His voice cracked with emotion. "I've been CA-ing this for 2 years, he said. "I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I saw a bulldozer on a site, I saw their faces. I just want someone to know the truth." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Frank, we're going to make sure the truth comes out. Not just for us. For all of them." We spent the afternoon recording his testimony. I took it to Rachel Walsh the next day. She used it as the basis for her second article. The headline: Whistleblower exposes developers' pattern of fraud and intimidation. The article went viral. Local news picked it up. National outlets STA route calling. CA Russo's investors began pulling out. His project stalled. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters, but Rachel didn't back down. She had the documents. She had Frank. She had me. By the end of the week, Vincent California Russo had lost 3 major development contracts. His reputation was in ruins. And Derek was named as a co-conspirator in the articles. The police expanded their investigation to include him. He was now facing not just civil lawsuits, but potential criminal charges. I received one more visit. Not from America's Web. From a woman I hadn't seen in 30 years. Derek's mother. She stood on my front porch, her face wet with tears. Margaret, she said, her voice trembling. I know what my son did. I know what he planned. I'm so ashamed. I came to ask you to have mercy. He's lost everything. His job, his CAR, his marriage. He's staying with me in my little apartment, and he can get out of bed. He's broken. I looked at her. This was the woman whose mortgage I had paid for years, without ever telling anyone. The woman whose house I had saved from foreclosure multiple times. She had no idea that I was the reason she still had a roof over her head. And I didn't tell her. That wasn't the point. Margaret, I said, I'm not here to punish you. But I'm not going to stop what's STA route. Your son made choices. He made them over and over again. He planned to destroy my life, to take my home, to put me away so he could steal what HA rolled and I worked for. I'm not the one who broke him. He broke himself. She stood there, silent, her eyes pleading. Then she nodded and walked away, her shoulders hunched with grief. That night, I sat in my living room with Emily. We're almost done, I said. The police have enough. His accounts refrozen. His reputation is destroyed. And CA Russo is finished. Mom, Emily said softly, what about the money? Did we get it back? Most of it, I said. But I don't CA about the money. I CA about justice. I CA about making sure he never does this to anyone else. Emily hugged me. You're the strongest person I know. No, honey, I said, stroking her hair. I'm just a mother who fought back. And I'd do it again. But the war wasn't over. There was one more person I needed to confront. Not Derek. Not CA Russo. The man who had been the first to plant the idea. The man who had connected Derek to CA Russo in the first place. The friend of a friend at Golden Meadows. Dr. Leona Road Price. I called the state medical BOA Road. I reported him for ethics violations, for signing off on fraudulent psychological evaluations. I provided evidence of his connection to CA Russo's operation. Within days, his license was suspended pending an investigation. His practice was closed. He was facing criminal charges of his own, and finally, the last domino fell. Derek was arrested at his mother's apartment, taken in for questioning, and charged with multiple counts of financial exploitation of an elderly person, fraud, and conspiracy. He posted bail, paid by his mother, but he knew it was over. The court hearings would drag on for months, maybe years. But he would never work in finance again. He would never own a home, never hold a management position, never be trusted again. I watched the news coverage with Emily, sitting on the couch, holding hands. The reporter on TV said, the case has shed light on a widespread problem of financial elder abuse in Columbus, leading to new legislation being proposed to protect vulnerable seniors. I turned to Emily. See, honey, that's the real victory. Not just stopping Derek. Stopping the whole system that let people like him operate. It was time to rebuild. I took some of the money I had recovered and STA root a small foundation. The Kennedy Trust. It provided legal aid and financial counseling to seniors at risk. I hired Frank, the whistleblower, as a consultant. I called Rachel Walsh to write about the foundation. And I made sure that every single person who had been victimized by CA Russo's operation got their day in court, with good lawyers, at no cost to them. Derek's trial was a media circus. He sat in the courtroom, his face pale and haggard. Emily testified against him, her voice steady, her eyes dry. I testified too. I told the jury, everything. I told them about the GA rage door, the whispered phone call, the plot to steal my money and put me away. I told them about the way he had smiled at me over dinner, the way he had kissed my cheek, the way he had called me May, RGA read. As if we were friends, the jury took less than an hour to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. I watched him be led away in handcuffs. He looked back at me once. His eyes were empty. He had nothing left. Not the money. Not the house. Not the CAR. Not the mistress. Not his freedom. Nothing. That I stood outside the courthouse, the sun was on my face, and I breathed. I breathed for the first time in months, without the weight of fear. H.A. Rold's voice echoed in my memory. You did good, M.A. Regi. You always did. I turned to Emily, who was standing beside me. Let's go home, I said. We walked to the CAR, and I drove us back to the house. The house that was still mine. The house that H.A. Rold had built with his hands and his heart. The house that had NEARLY been stolen by a man who smiled like a friend. As I pulled into the driveway, I looked at the GA rage door. The chain drive motor I had replaced 3 autumns ago. The sound that had once brought me comfort was now a memory of the night everything changed. But it was also a reminder. I heard the truth because I listened. And because I listened, I survived. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the SDARS come out. Emily brought me tea. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We were safe. We were free. And we had each other. That I looked out at the street and thought about all the people who had been hurt by men like Derek and C.A. Russo. I thought about Frank, the whistleblower, who had lived in fear RS. I thought about the elderly woman on Maple Street and the disabled veteran on Oak. And I thought about all the others whose names I would never know. I made a promise to myself that night. I would keep fighting. Not for revenge. Revenge was empty. I would fight for justice. For every senior who had ever been told they were too old, too weak, too confused to defend themselves. I would be their voice. I would be their advocate. The foundation grew. We hired more lawyers, more counselors. We set up a hotline for seniors to call when they suspected financial abuse. We lobbied for stricter laws, tougher penalties. And we won. Derek's trial was the beginning. But it wasn't the end. The ripple effects spread through the city. Golden Meadows was investigated and closed. The developers who had worked with C.A. Russo went bankrupt. The politicians who had taken his money were forced to resign. And me, I'm still here. I turned 73 this year. My knees still ache when the humidity comes. But I don't mind. I'm too busy to notice. Every Tuesday, I go to the foundation's office and read letters from seniors who are grateful for our help. I'm not a fighter, I want to tell them. I'm just a woman who overheard a phone call, but that's not true. I didn't just overhear. I acted. And that's what made all the difference. Emily is dating a new man now. A math teacher. Quiet, kind, good with his hands. He reminded me of H.A. Rold the first time I met him. Emily laughed when I said that. Mom, everyone reminds you of Dad. I shrugged. That's a compliment. I still sleep in H.A. Rold's side of the bed. And I still wake up every morning grateful for another day. Life has a way of evening out. The falls a hard, but the rises a sweet. And if you're lucky, you get a chance to get even. Derek thought he was the predator. He thought I was prey. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't just any old woman. I was the woman who held the hand of a dying man and promised to protect his family. I was the woman who kept a RDWA store running through a recession. I was the woman who knew the difference between a smile and a threat. And that night, when I heard him whispering in the dark, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I listened. And then I acted. There's a line between victim and victor. Sometimes it's as thin as a GA rage door. Derek had been in prison for 3 months when I got the first letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address. The postmark RK smudged. I recognized the handwriting immediately. That RP slanted script of a man who had always thought he was better than everyone else. I almost threw it in the trash, but something made me open it. He wrote from his cell. The letter was long, rambling, full of self-pity. He talked about his mother, how she had come to visit him once, and left crying. He talked about his job, how he would never work again. He talked about the other inmates, how they had made his life a living hell. And he blamed me, not for catching him, for making him do what he did. He wrote that if I had just cooperated, none of this would have happened. He wrote that I had ruined his life on purpose. I read the letter twice. The first time, I felt a flash of anger. The second time, I felt nothing. He was a man who could not see his own reflection. He was so deeply broken that he couldn't understand that his suffering was his own creation. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I never wrote back. But the letter reminded me of something. Derek had been working at the bank for years before he met Emily. He had been committing fraud long before he met me. The patterns were deep. And his victims weren't just family members. There were clients. People who had trusted him with their retirement savings. People who had lost everything. I asked Janet to look into it. She came back with a report that made my blood run cold. In the 3 years before Derek married Emily, he had been involved in at least 7 cases of financial mismanagement that had resulted in client losses. 3 of those cases had been settled quietly by the bank, with non-disclosure agreements, for had been buried so deep that even Janet had trouble finding them. But she found them. The bank knew, I said, ring at the report. They knew he was a fraud, and they protected him. Janet nodded. It's worse than that, mat. His supervisor at the time, a man named Robert Hanley, was the one who covered it up. Hanley is now a senior vice president. He got promoted for protecting the bank's reputation. Derek was his golden boy. I felt the familiar heat in my chest. That righteous fury. It had been dormant for months, but now it read back to life. I want Hanley, I said. I want to take down the whole structure. Janet studied me. That's a bigger battle, mat. Derek was small-time comparable to these people. Hanley has connections. He's been at the bank for 20 years. He knows everyone. I don't I said. I already took down Russo. I can take down Hanley too. I just need the right weapon. The weapon came in an unexpected form. A woman named Patricia. She called the foundation one afternoon, her voice trembling. She had been a client of the bank's wealth management division. Derek had been her advisor. He had invested her entire life savings in high-risk derivatives without her permission. She had lost over $2 million. She had been forced to sell her home. She was living with her daughter now, ashamed and broken. I didn't know where else to go, she said, crying. I called the bank, and they told me it was a market fluctuation. They made me feel like I was crazy, like I had signed something I didn't remember. I didn't sign anything. I know I didn't. I felt her pain like it was my own. I knew that feeling, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the sense that you were losing your mind. I promised her we would help. I put Emily on the case. She was good at this now. She had become the foundation's lead investigator, uncovering patterns of abuse that others had missed. She found Patricia's file. She found the original account agreement. The signatures were forged. Derek had signed her name, and Robert Hanley had authorized the transactions. That's it, Emily said, her voice steady. That's the smoking gun. Hanley knew. He approved the trades. He's complicit. I called Rachel Walsh. The third article was published 2 weeks later. The headline was brutal. Bank executives protected fraudster, client lost life savings. The article named Robert Hanley. It detailed the cover-up, the settlements, the silencing of victims. It included Patricia's story. It included the forged signatures. The backlash was immediate. Hanley was placed on administrative leave. The bank stock dropped. Investors demanded answers. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. By the end of the month, Hanley had been fired. He was under investigation for fraud, perjury, and obstruction of justice. But I wasn't done. I had Leah reneged something during my RS at the RDWA restore. When you're dealing with rot, you don't just cut out the infected wood. You have to find the source of the leak. Hanley wasn't the source. He was a symptom. The source, I discovered, was a culture. A system that revered silence and punished whistleblowers. A system that valued profit over people. It wasn't just one bank. It was the industry. And I couldn't fix that. Not alone. But I could shine a light on it. ISTA Root speaking publicly. At first, it was small community meetings, local radio interviews. But the story grew. Patricia's case caught the attention of a national news network. They wanted to do a segment on financial elder abuse. They wanted to interview me. I was terrified. I was an old woman with bad knees. I didn't belong on television. But I thought about H.A. Rolled. I thought about the RDWA restore. I thought about all the times he had stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. I said yes that the interview aired on a Sunday night. I wore my best dress, a navy blue one that H.A. Rolled had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I sat in a studio under bright lights, and I told the country what had happened to me. I told them about Derek, about the GA rage door, about the nursing home plan. I told them about C.A. Russo, about Hanley, about Patricia. I told them about the system that let it happen. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from every state. People read their own stories. A woman in Florida who had been defrauded by her son. A man in California whose business partner had stolen his retirement. A family in Texas whose elderly mother had been drugged and forced to sign over her house. The stories were heartbreaking, but they were also hopeful, because people were speaking out. They were no longer silent, and I realized that my story wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. Every senior who had been told they were too old to understand. Every widow who had been manipulated by the people she trusted. Every family who had been torn apart by greed. ISTA Root a YouTube channel for the foundation. I didn't know how to use the camera, but Emily taught me. I sat in my living room, the same room where I had heard the truth through the GA rage door, and I told stories. Not just my own. The stories of others. I gave them a voice that the channel grew. Thousands of subscribers. Tens of thousands. People watched my videos and wrote comments, sharing their own experiences. I became a symbol of resistance. An icon of the fight against elder abuse, but with visibility came threats. ISTA Root getting letters from people who didn't want me to succeed. One came from a lawyer representing Derek's mother, demanding I stop defaming her son. Another came from a man who claimed to be a representative of C.A. Russo's remaining associates, warning me to back off. I ignored them all. Then the phone calls STA Root. Late at night. Heavy breathing. Silence. Sometimes a voice, muffled, telling me to watch my back. I wasn't afraid. I had been through worse. I had survived Derek. I had survived C.A. Russo. I could survive a few anonymous RDS, but Emily was worried. She insisted on staying with me at night. She bought a security system, installed cameras. She was my daughter, but she was also my guardian. She had become strong in ways I never imagined. One night, we sat on the porch together, looking at the stars. "Mom," she said, "do you ever regret it? Going after him like that?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I regret that I had to. I wish he had been a better man. I wish he had loved you the way you deserved. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret protecting myself. And I don't regret protecting other people." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. And I'm proud of you. Look at what you've done. Look at how many people we've helped." She smiled. "We're a team." "Yes," I said. Weary. A few weeks later, I received a second letter from Derek. This one was different. It was short, almost conciliatory. He wrote that he had been reading in the prison library, that he had STA Root to understand the consequences of his actions. He wrote that he was sorry, not for getting caught, for what he had done. He wrote that he knew he could never make it right, but he wanted to try. I read the letter 3 times. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel forgiveness. I felt something quieter, a sort of exhaustion, a recognition that he was finally seeing himself clearly, and that the site was unbearable. That I wrote back. I wrote one sentence. "I hope you find the peace you couldn't give me." I never heard from him again. The foundation continued to grow. We opened a satellite office in Cincinnati. We hired more staff. We trained community volunteers to recognize signs of elder abuse. We partnered with law enforcement and local government. We became a model for other states. But I never forgot my roots. I still went to the RDWA restore sometimes, just to walk through the aisles and remember. It had been bought by a young couple, just STA rooting out. They had restored it, painted the walls, put up new shelves. It was beautiful. And every time I walked in, they greeted me like family. "You're a legend around here, Mrs. Kennedy," the young woman said one day. "My grandma told us about you. She said you were the reason she got her house back." I smiled. "I'm just a woman who heard a phone call." "No," she said. "You're so much more than that." I walked out of the store that day with a new feeling. Not pride, exactly. Something rarer. Contentment. I had been through the fire, and I had come out the other side. Not unscathed. The scars were there. The memories. The nights when I still woke up in a cold sweat. But I had emerged. I was intact. I was whole. Emily got ma right again. A small ceremony in the backyard where I had planted roses with HA rolled. The math teacher, James, stood beside her, his eyes full of love. I officiated the wedding. I had never done it before, but I read a poem and I spoke from my heart. I told them that marriage was not about perfection. It was about partnership. It was about standing together when the world fell apart. I thought about HA rolled, watching from wherever he was. I knew he would have approved. James was a good man. Quiet, steady, honest. He reminded me of my husband in all the ways that mattered. After the wedding, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. The grandfather clock ticked. I held H.A. Rolled's picture, and I talked to him. "You be proud of Emily," I said. "She turned out just like you. Strong, brave, kind. She found someone good. We're going to be okay." I put the picture down and looked around the room. It was the same room where I had sat in the dark, clutching his revolver. The same room where I had planned my revenge. The same room where I had finally found peace. I had root this journey as a victim. A widow, alone, trusting the wrong people. I had ended it as something else. A force. A voice. A woman who refused to be silent. The phone rang. It was Patricia. She had just gotten a check from the bank, a settlement for her losses. She was crying. "Margaret, I don't know how to thank you." "Just live well," I said. "That's all the thanks I need." I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself enjoy it. The fight wasn't over. There were still banks to challenge, still victims to help, still stories to tell. But I had Leah reneged something valuable. The battle is never truly won. You just keep fighting, day after day, until the world becomes a little more just than it was before. I looked at the GA rage door, standing silent and solid. That door had changed my life. It had opened a window into the truth. It had given me the weapon I needed to destroy the man who wanted to destroy me. I smiled. "Thank you," I whispered, "for letting me listen." And that night, I slept better than I had in years. The years passed like water through a sieve. I turned 75, then 78. The foundation had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We had offices in 4 states now, a staff of 30, a board of directors that included lawyers, financial experts, and social workers. I had stepped back from the day-to-day operations, but I still went to the office every Tuesday. It was my anchor, my reason to get out of bed. That Emily had taken over as executive director. She was brilliant at it. She had the same sharp mind her father had, the same ability to see through lies and find the truth. She had become a formidable woman, respected and feared by the banks she challenged. James supported her completely. They had bought a house 2 blocks away from me, close enough that I could walk over for dinner whenever I wanted. I spent my days tending to my GA Reden, reading mystery novels, and visiting H.A. Rolled's grave. I still talked to him. I told him about the foundation, about Emily, about the world. I told him about the new grandchild. A little boy named Henry, with Emily's eyes and James's calm temperament. I told him I wished he could have seen it all if the lawsuit against the bank had finally settled. Patricia got her money back plus interest. The bank had been forced to pay millions in fines and restitution. Robert Hanley had been convicted and was serving time in a federal prison. The bank's reputation never recovered. They had merged with another institution and the name was gone. I took no pleasure in their fall. I felt only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been done. But there was one thing I hadn't done. One thing I had been avoiding for years. I had never confronted Emily about her role in the whole affair. Not because I blamed her, I never did, but because I knew she carried guilt. She had lived with Derek, she had trusted him, she had brought him into my home. She had been the unwitting conduit for his schemes. And even though she had testified against him, even though she had helped me bring him down, I knew a part of her still blamed herself. I decided it was time to have the conversation. I invited her to lunch at a small cafe, NEA, or her office. We sat in the corner booth, away from the noise. She looked at me with her mother's eyes, sharp, cautious, already bracing for something heavy. "Mom, what's this about?" she asked, buttering a roll. "I've been thinking," I said, "about that time. When Derek was here. When everything happened." She put the butter knife down. "I don't think about it much anymore. I try not to." "I know, honey, but I need to say something. I need you to hear it." She nodded, her face tense. "Emily, I have never blamed you. Not for one moment. You were in love. You trusted a man who betrayed that trust. That's not your fault. That's his. And I want you to let go of the guilt you're carrying. I want you to be free of it." She read at me, her eyes glistening. "Mom, I brought him into our lives. I introduced him to you. If you hadn't, I would never have heard that phone call," I said. "I would never have known what he was planning. He would have taken everything, and I would have been helpless. You didn't bring him in. You brought the truth to light. You were the reason I won." She root to cry. Silent tears, the kind she had rented to cry when she was a little girl and didn't want anyone to see. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You saved me, Emily. You and that rage door. And I will never forget it." We sat there for a long time, holding hands, not saying anything. It was enough. It was everything that I went home that afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. I had said what needed to be said. The last weight had been lifted, but life has a way of throwing surprises at you, even in your 70s. It was a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks later when I got the call. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, shaky. She said she was a journalist from a local paper doing a follow-up story on the foundation. She wanted to ask me a few questions. I agreed to meet her at the office. She was young, maybe 30, with a sharp face and watchful eyes. She introduced herself as Ra. We sat in my small office, surrounded by files and our RDS. "Mrs. Kennedy," she said, "I've been researching the Derek Thornton case. And I've found something that I think you should see." She slid a folder across the desk. I opened it. Inside were copies of emails. Emails between Derek and a woman I didn't recognize. The name at the top was Stephanie, his mistress. But the emails weren't about their affair. They were about something else. Something bigger. I read through them. My hands root to shake. Stephanie wasn't just Derek's mistress. She was his partner. She had been the one who supplied the forged signatures, the fake documents, the offshore accounts. She had worked at the bank's compliance department. She knew how to hide the trail. And when Derek was arrested, she had disappeared. But she hadn't vanished completely. Ra had found her. She was living in Nevada, working for another bank under a different name. And she was still doing the same thing. Still forging documents. Still stealing from the elderly. "Mrs. Kennedy," Ra said, "I think you need to decide whether you want to take this on. It's a whole new case. But if you do, I can help. I have contacts. I have sources." I looked at the folder. I looked at the emails. I remembered the rage I had felt that night in the rage. I remembered the fear, the helplessness, the absolute betrayal. And I remembered what I had become in the aftermath. A woman who refused to be a victim. A woman who fought back. Yes, I said, closing the folder. I want to take it on. The investigation took 6 months. S.A. Raw and I worked closely with Emily, with Janet, with Rachel Walsh. We built a case against Stephanie. We found her victims. We found her new identity. We found the evidence, and on a cold November morning, Stephanie was arrested at her office in Nevada. She was charged with fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. She was extradited to Ohio to face trial, but I didn't testify in that trial. I didn't need to. The evidence was overwhelming. Stephanie was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because Stephanie had been part of something larger, a network of people who preyed on the elderly. And the investigation had uncovered another name. A man named Paul Mason. He had been Stephanie's supervisor at the bank in Nevada. He had known what she was doing. And he had been Derek's partner before he moved to Nevada. The threads all led back to the same place. A conspiracy. A ring of financial predators who had been operating for years, targeting vulnerable seniors across multiple states. They had stolen millions. They had ruined lives. And they had been protected by a network of corrupt lawyers, doctors, and even judges. It was a web of evil that stretched further than I had ever imagined. I was 79 years old. I had been through a war. I had won. And now I was facing a new battle, bigger than anything I had fought before, but I wasn't afraid. I had learned something in the RS since the GA rage. I had learned that justice is not a destination. It's a journey, a constant, ongoing struggle. And every time you win, you realize there's another fight waiting. The fight against Paul Mason was the hardest of all. He was richer than C.A. Russo, more connected than Hanley, more cunning than Derek. He had lawyers who specialized in burying cases. He had judges in his pocket. He had a network that stretched across the country, but we had something he didn't have. We had the truth. We had the victims. We had the evidence. And we had a community of people who refused to be silent. The trial was a circus. It lasted 6 months. There were protests outside the courthouse, both for and against us. There were threats, anonymous phone calls, mysterious break-ins at the foundation office. We never found out who was responsible, but we never stopped fighting. And in the end, we won. Paul Mason was convicted of multiple counts of fraud, racketeering, and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The network was dismantled. The doctors were arrested, the lawyers disbarred, the judges impeached. It was the biggest victory the Foundation had ever achieved. But I felt hollow. Not because the victory was empty, but because I realized that this would never be over. There would always be another predator, another scam, another victim. The fight would never end. I went home that evening and sat in my garden. The roses were blooming, red and pink and white. The bees were humming. The air smelled sweet. It was beautiful. And I felt old that I had spent the last decade of my life fighting monsters. I had won every battle. But I had lost something too. I had lost the peace of mind I had fought so hard to protect. I had become a warrior, and warriors never truly rest. Emily came out and sat beside me. "You look tired, Mom." "I am tired," I said. "I think I might be done." She smiled. "You said that before." "I mean it this time. The Foundation is in good hands. Your hands. I don't need to be the one in the fight anymore. I just want to sit in the garden and watch the roses grow." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "You've done enough, Mom. You've done more than anyone ever could. It's okay to rest now." I nodded. "I think I will." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The fight wasn't over. It was just sta rooting. There was a new generation of predators out there, and they were SMA ruder, more sophisticated, more dangerous than the ones I had faced. And the people who would fight them were still young, still learning, still coming into their power. I had done my part, but the legacy I had built was bigger than me. It was an army of people who had learned to stand up for themselves. A network of advocates, lawyers, counselors, and families who would not let the predators win. And as I sat in the GA den, watching the sun go down, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace of victory. Not the peace of surrender. The peace of knowing that I had passed the torch, that the fight would continue, and that I had made a difference. Emily was the future. She had the same fire, the same courage, the same refusal to back down. She would lead the foundation into the next decade, the next century, and she would be stronger than I ever was. That night, I went to bed with a smile on my face. I dreamed of H.A. Rold. He was standing in the hot RDWA store, a hammer in his hand, smiling at me. "You did good, Emerji," he said. "You always did." I woke up the next morning and decided to write a book. Not for money, not for fame, for the people who would come after me, for the seniors who were afraid to speak up, for the families who didn't know where to turn. I wrote it in 6 months. I called it the GA Rage Door. I told the story of my life, from the moment I heard Derek's voice in the arcade to the conviction of Paul Mason. I told the truth. All of it. The fear, the rage, the sorrow, the triumph. That the book was published when I was 82. It became a bestseller. People wrote to me from all over the world. They told me that my story had given them courage, that they had finally spoken up, that they had fought back, that I didn't read about the money. I donated all the proceeds to the foundation, but I read about the letters. I read every single one. And every time I read one, I felt a little more of the weight lift from my shoulders. I was 85 when I retired completely. I sold the house I had fought so hard to keep. It was time. It was too big for me, too full of memories. I bought a small cottage in Florida, the beach. Emily and James came to visit every year. Henry, my grandson, grew tall and strong that I spent my days walking on the sand, watching the waves, feeling the wind on my face. I didn't think about Derek. I didn't think about C.A. Russo or Hanley or Paul Mason. I thought about H.A. Rold. I thought about Emily. I thought about all the people I had helped. I was old. I was tired. But I was at peace. The last letter I ever received came from Derek's mother. She wrote to say that her son had been released from prison. He was living with her in Cincinnati. He was still broken. He would never be the same. She asked me to forgive him. I wrote back. I didn't say whether I forgave him. I said this. I hope he has found the peace he couldn't give me. I hope he uses the rest of his life to become a better man. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him well. I wish him honest. I never heard from her again. I died on a Tuesday morning, in my sleep. Emily was there holding my hand. I opened my eyes one last time, and I saw her face. I said, "I love you, sweetie Artie." And then I closed my eyes, and I was gone. Did I think I saw H.A. Rold? He was waiting for me, standing in a field of flowers, his hand outstretched. He looked the same as he did the day I married him. Tall, handsome. "Welcome home, Emerji," he said, and I smiled, and I took his hand, and I walked into the light. I am old now, older than I ever thought I would be. My hands re-spotted, my knees re-shot, and my memory plays tricks on me some days. But I remember that night like it was yesterday. The GA Rage Door. The voice. The plan. The moment I decided I would not be a victim, that I sit on my porch in Florida, watching the waves roll in, and I think about all the things that happened after. The letters, the lawsuits, the trials, the victories. The foundation, the book, the speeches. The women who wrote to me, thanking me for giving them the courage to fight. The men who wrote to me, angry, accusing me of ruining their lives. I kept all the letters. I still have them in a box under my bed. Some days I pull them out and read them again. Not because I need the validation, because I need to remember. Remember what it felt like to be powerless. Remember what it felt like to take that power back. My grandson Henry is 22 now. He came to visit me last week. He brought his girlfriend, a bright-eyed girl named Mia, who works at a non-profit in Atlanta. They sat on the porch with me, drinking lemonade, and Henry told me he wanted to see a RRY on the work. He wanted to join the Foundation, to Leah RN from his mother, to continue the fight. I looked at him, this tall young man with my husband's eyes and his mother's determination, and I felt a swell of pride so big it almost hurt. "You don't have to do this, Henry," I said. "You can do anything you want. You don't have to CA-RRY my burdens." He leaned four-way RD and took my hand. "Grandma, you didn't CA-RRY a burden. You CA-ride a torch. And I want to CA-RRY it too." I didn't cry. I don't cry anymore. But I felt something open in my chest, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "You do that, Henry," I said. "You CA-RRY at FAR, and you CA-RRY at high. And when you get tired, you find someone else to pass it to. That's how we win. Not by defeating all the monsters. By making sure the monsters never win again." He smiled at me, that same smile Rold used to give me when I was being stubborn. "I promise, Grandma." That night, after Henry and Mia had gone to bed, I walked down to the beach. The moon was full, casting silver light on the water. I stood at the edge of the sea, the waves washing over my feet, and I talked to Rold. "Did you hear that?" I said. "He wants to CA-RRY the torch. Our Henry. I wish you could have seen him. He's so much like you. Same quiet strength. Same goodness. We did good, Rold. We built something worth passing on." I thought about all the hours I had spent fighting, the sleepless nights, the days of rage, the moments of despair. I thought about the people I had lost and the people I had saved. I thought about the old woman on Maple Street and the veteran on Oak and Patricia and Frank and all the others whose names I had written down in a notebook I still kept on my nightstand. I thought about Derek. I had not thought about him in years, not really. He had become a ghost, a shadow in the corner of my memory. I wondered where he was, what he was doing, if he had ever found the peace I had wished him. I didn't hate him. I hadn't hated him for a long time. Hate is too heavy a burden for an old woman to CA-RRY. I had let it go somewhere along the way, but I also hadn't forgotten. That was the difference between me and him. He had been consumed by his greed, his arrogance, his belief that he could take whatever he wanted. I had been consumed by something else. A fire that burned with purpose. A need to make things right. Not for me. For all the people who couldn't fight for themselves. I walked back up to the cottage, my steps slow and deliberate. The sand was COL under my feet. The stars were bright. I had lived a long life, and it had been a hard one. But it had been a meaningful one. I had loved, and I had lost, and I had fought, and I had won. I had built something from nothing, turned my pain into power, and given that power to others. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of seagulls. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sun rise over the ocean. I thought about my book. It had been 10 years since it was published. I had made a choice then, one that I had never regretted. I had given every single dollar of the royalties to the Foundation. Not because I was generous. Because I knew that money was never the point. The point was the message. The point was the story. The point was to tell every senior in this country that they did not have to accept being a victim. That they could fight back. That they could win. I opened my laptop and checked the email. There was a message from Emily. She wrote that the Foundation had just won a major lawsuit against a healthcare network that had been systematically defrauding Medicare patients. The settlement was in the tens of millions. The money would be used to fund free legal clinics for seniors in all 50 states. I smiled. Emily was building an empire. Not one of greed or power, but of compassion and justice. She had become everything I had hoped she would be. And more. I wrote back. "You made me so proud, Emily. But I already told you that. So I'll tell you again. You made me so proud. And your father would be proud too." She wrote back within minutes. "I love you, Mom. I'll be down to visit next week. Save me a seat on the porch." I sat there, watching the sea, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Joy. Not the fleeting joy of victory, but the deep, abiding joy of peace. I had done what I set out to do. I had protected what was mine. I had helped others protect what was theirs. and I had made a world a little better than the one I found.
My phone rang.
It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. "Hello," I said. "Mrs. Kennedy." The voice was old, shaky, female. "My name is Dorothy. I live in Ohio. I read your book last year. It changed my life. I want to thank you. I was being scammed, just like you were. But I heard your voice in my head. You said not to be silent. So I spoke up. I went to the police. And I got my money back." I closed my eyes. The tears came, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "Dorothy, thank you for telling me that. You made my day." "No, Mrs. Kennedy. You made mine. You gave me the courage to fight. I'm 87 years old, and I thought I was finished. But I wasn't, and neither are you." I laughed. It was a good laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. "You're right, Dorothy. Neither of us is finished. We've still got work to do." We talked for another hour. She told me her story, and I listened. I listened the way I had listened that night at the GA rage door. I heard the pain, the fear, the determination. And I heard the hope. When I hung up, I sat for a long time. STA ring at the ocean. I thought about all the Dorothys out there. All the women and men who were afraid, who had been lied to, who had been stripped of their dignity. I thought about the stories they ride, the burdens they bore. And I made a decision that I was going to write another book. Not my story. Theirs. A collection of voices from across the country, from people who had fought back and won. I would call it The Voices. And I would make sure that every senior in America knew they were not alone. I spent the next 6 months working on it. I reached out to the people who had written to me over the years. I asked them to share their stories. They sent me letters, emails, recordings. And I wove them together into a tapestry of courage and resilience. The book was published on my 88th birthday. It was not a bestseller like the first one, but I didn't I knew it would find its readers. The ones who needed it. The ones who were still waiting for permission to fight back. I held a copy in my hands, the cover bright and hopeful, and I felt a sense of completion. My life had come full circle. I had STA root as a victim, became a warrior, and now I was a witness. A witness to the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I went to the mailbox one afternoon and found a letter. It was from Derek. I almost threw it away. But I didn't. He wrote that he had been living in a small town in Kentucky, working at a RDWA store. He said he thought about me every day, not with anger, but with a kind of sad respect. He said he had read both my books. He said he finally understood what he had done, not just to me but to everyone. He said he was trying to be better. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that he had changed. I read the letter 3 times.
I didn't write back.
But I put the letter in the box under my bed with all the others. Not because I wanted to remember him, because I wanted to remember what I had overcome. That Emily came to visit me that weekend. She looked tired but happy. She told me about the new clinics, the new lawyers, the new victories. She told me about Henry, who had just STA root working at the foundation and had already identified a new scheme targeting senior veterans. "He's good, Mom," she said. "He's really good." "He got it from you," I said. She smiled. "And I got it from you." We sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the water. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. "Mom," Emily said, "are you happy?" I thought about it. I thought about the GA rage door. I thought about the rage, and the fear, and the pain. I thought about the lawsuits and the trials and the victories. I thought about the letters and the phone calls and the people I had helped. I thought about H.A. Rold and the love we had shared. I thought about Emily and the woman she had become. I thought about Henry and the man he was becoming. "Yes," I said. "I'm happy. Not because I won. I'm happy because I lived. I lived every single day, even the hard ones. I didn't give up. I didn't back down. I stood up for what was right, and I helped others do the same." Emily took my hand. "I'm going to CARY your torch, Mom. I promise." You already agree, sweet ART, I said. You already agree. We sat there in silence, the waves crashing softly in the background. I felt a deep, abiding peace. The kind that comes only after a long journey. The kind that cannot be taken away. I thought about all the people who had tried to steal from me, manipulate me, destroy me. They were gone now, their names forgotten. But I was still here. My story was still being told. And it would continue to be told. Long after I was gone that night, I went to bed with a smile on my face. I dreamed of H.A. Rold, but not the same dream I used to have. He was not standing in the RDWA store. He was sitting on a porch, watching the ocean just like the one in Florida. He was smiling. "Mag," he said. "You did good. You always did." I woke up the next morning, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt alive. I felt ready for whatever came next, because I had learned something that no one could ever take from me. I had learned that power is not given. It is taken. And it is taken by those who refuse to be silent. That night at the GA Rage door, I had a choice. I could have been afraid. I could have cried. I could have given up. But I didn't. I chose to fight. And that choice made all the difference. That there is a line between victim and victor. Sometimes it's as thin as a GA Rage door. Sometimes it's just a decision. A decision to listen. A decision to act. A decision to never, ever let anyone tell you what you're worth. Derek thought he had won. He thought he could take everything from me. But he didn't win. Because he didn't understand what I was fighting for. He was fighting for money. I was fighting for dignity. And dignity always wins. So if you're out there reading this and you feel small and you feel powerless and you feel like the world has taken everything from you, remember me. Remember the old woman in Ohio who he heard a phone call and changed her life. Remember the GA Rage door. And remember this, you have a voice. And your voice is powerful. Use it. Fight back. Speak up. Refuse to be a victim. Because, in the end, we are not defined by what happens to us. We are redefined by what we do about it. I turned 90 last spring. The foundation through Mia Paruti, Emily, James, Henry, Mia, and dozens of others, friends, colleagues, people I had helped, people who had helped me. They all came to the cottage in Florida, and we ate cake and laughed and told stories. Patricia was there. She had become a volunteer for the foundation, helping other victims navigate the system. She had recovered, not just her money, but her confidence. She smiled more than I had ever seen her smile. Frank was there too, the whistleblower. He had been working with the foundation for years, training new staff, sharing his story. His eyes no longer ride that haunted look. He was free. And there were others.
Dozens of them.
People whose names I had written in my notebook, whose stories I had ride with me. They were all there, celebrating not just my life, but the life we had built together. I stood at the front of the room, my hands on my cane, and I looked out at them. I felt a wave of emotions so powerful I could be a rely speak. But I did. "Friends," I said, "I never expected to have this many people at my birthday party. I never expected to have any of this. I was a widow alone," read, "and I thought my life was over. But it wasn't. Because I heard a phone call. And because I listened, I found all of you. And all of you found me." Emily wiped her eyes. Henry was crying. Even James, quiet, steady James, had tears in his eyes. "So, I want to thank you," I said. "Not for the party. For the fight. For not giving up. For standing with me. For making sure that the Derek Thorntons of the world never win. This is not my victory. It's ours. Every single one of us." They cheered. I laughed. And for one perfect moment, I was young again. I was standing in the RDWA store with H.A. Rold, watching him stock shelves, feeling the RMTH of a life built on honesty and RD work. I was there. And I was happy after the party. After everyone had left, Emily and I sat on the porch. The STRs were out, bright and endless. "Mom," she said, "I have something to tell you." "What is it, sweet Artie?" "I'm expanding the foundation. We're going national. I've already got commitments from donors in every region. We're going to open a hotline, a 24/7 service, so seniors can call anytime, day or night, and get help. We're going to be everywhere. I took her hand. That's wonderful, Emily. That's everything we ever wanted. She looked at me. I did it for you, Mom. I wanted to make you proud.
You already did, I said.
You already did. The next morning, I woke up early. I walked down to the beach one last time. The sun was rising over the water, painting the world in gold. I stood at the edge of the sea, and I said goodbye to H.A. Rolled, to the hot RDWA restore, to the GA rage door, to the fight, to the fear, to the rage, to the pain. I let it all go. I let the waves wash it away. I said thank you for the life I had lived, for the people I had loved, for the battles I had won, for the peace I had found and I walked back to the cottage, my steps slow but steady, till I knew that the time was coming. I could feel it in my bones. But I wasn't afraid. I had done what I came to do, I had protected my family. I had helped others. I had left my ma RK on the world. The GA rage door had been the beginning.
But this was the end.
And it was a good end, because I had lived a life that mattered. And that is all any of us can ever ask for. So, my friends, if you have read this FAR, I want you to remember one thing. The monsters are real. They are out there, wearing friendly smiles, speaking kind words, making you believe they are on your side. But when you hear that whisper in the RK, when you hear your name spoken in a way that makes your blood run cold, do not be silent, listen.
Act.
Fight back, because you are not powerless. You are not old. You are not weak. You are a force. You are a warrior. You are stronger than you know. I am MARGA Rhett Kennedy. I am 90 years old. I am a widow, a mother, a grandmother, and a fighter. And I am telling you right now with my whole heart, you can do it too. The GA rage door opened my eyes. The fight opened my heart. And the victory opened my soul. So go ahead. Open your door. Hear what you need to hear. And then do what you need to do. Because in the end, the only person who can save you is you. But you don't have to do it alone. We are all here. We are all waiting. And we are all ready to fight. Subscribe to the channel. Share your stories. Speak your truth. Together, we will change the world.